My aunt told me the old milk house hadn't been open since 1947, but I knew that was bullshit. She exaggerates all the time to make things seem more dramatic. She must have forgotten that I had opened it up when I was a kid to get the lawnmower out numerous times, and she only paid me 50 cents to mow the lawn. She was cheap too. The milk house was a large, dilapidated, tan-colored shed with the broken remnants of a stable for cows attached to it. Now, the thing likely hadn't been cleaned out since 1947. I'll give her that, because that was the truth. And there was a locked up area we never went in, which likely inspired her little white lie. My great-grandfather Jack, the milkman, died there, collapsed mid-churn with his shit kickers on. And when my grandma took over the house, she made sure the old milking room, is what we used to call it, stayed sealed after that. And the cold stone cellar beneath it went untouched for decades. She wanted nothing to do with the cows or the milk and just became a neglected link to the past. That changed when the house went up for sale after my grandmother died and I became the cheap labor. I came back to Frankfurt to help my mom and Aunt Lydia get the place ready. Frankfurt was one of those many little weird towns in New York, with very specific identities nestled in the heart of the Mohawk Valley. This town skewed Italian, but the Germans that settled it and named it, like our family, still remained. My grandparents were both gone now, and Lydia refused to spend a dime keeping a house she hated alive. She wanted to use the money from the house to move to North Carolina to be near her high school friend Jackie. Not for nothing, but burn the whole goddamn thing down for all I care, she said, puffing her Marlboro Lights like an ornery dragon. This house is cursed, and so are we. Mom never left me nothing good. I can't wait to get the hell out of here. She wasn't wrong. Lydia was my grandma's twin if you drained out whatever warmth she'd ever had. Bitter, jealous, mean, always talking. Yep, that was Aunt Lydia. Behind her back, some called her the town gossip or the militant midget, their nickname, not mine, and others just pretended she didn't exist. Her two sons were useless, just like their father. Uncle Billy had been a real good guy once. I always liked him more than her and thought he was funny. He paid a price, though. Vietnam hollowed him out with PTSD that turned him into an abusive alcoholic, often passed out drunk by 2 p.m. on a good day. Sadly, like a lot of others who went to Nam, eventually Agent Orange got him, and he checked out with a shotgun when he found out that he had terminal cancer. Aunt Lydia's youngest kid, Alan, found him after 6 days in the middle of one of the hottest July months ever. She had divorced Billy back in the early 80s and braved it on her own with her two sons. Alan, who I had had some fun with over the years, was 4 years my elder and a bedwetting mama's boy who got coddled into social awkwardness. He grew up into an insecure energy vampire with teacher dreams. 10 years into a bachelor's degree, he still couldn't do anything with. He was a lot like her too, bitter and jealous, and a baby boomer trapped in a Gen X body. I was saddened by the man he became, especially after he drifted so far right into his politics that I couldn't even have a normal conversation with him anymore. So I didn't. Jimmy, his older brother, was a high school dropout, Army cast-off, who strangely developed a Southern accent by 16 years old, despite never living south of New York. He wore my grandpa's old snakeskin cowboy boots, walked with his chest puffed out, and laughed in an annoying way by repeating his own words like they were punchlines. He had a good heart once, but was easily sucked into conspiracy theories and fake news, and drifted even further right than his brother. Two sons, two short man complexes, raised by a miserable, overbearing mother and a dad who vanished into a bottle when they needed him most. Lydia stayed drunk, always had been, just like my grandparents. Breakfast was Milwaukee's best. Lunch was a nap. Dinner was more Milwaukee's best, with a highball or two. My grandparents raised the boys, while Lydia ran around town looking for a husband. She never found one, and ended up back in this house with Grandma. It was a bad living. They argued over the dumbest things, and drank nonstop until Grandma finally died of bladder cancer in August. With her idiot sons, unable to do much of anything, who were only around when they needed something while waiting for her to die to fetch an inheritance, Mom and I took over. Mom felt bad for her sister and yelled at me whenever I got too critical, but I couldn't help it. Lydia sucked the air out of her room the second she walked in. She would always cast spells of snide, condescending remarks my way too, usually referencing my intelligence, going to college, or bringing up something I wasn't good at as a kid out of jealousy. Sorry, I got an education and left, unlike your kids. Not my problem, I said to my mom, and then right after that, Lydia wandered in with a beer and proved my point. Be careful, Jackie. That cellar's a shithole. Nothing down there but old milk bottles and your grandma's Avon junk. Be careful with those though, honey. Jimmy says we can sell them on the internet, on eBay. You may be a college boy and all, but you never were the most nimble of foot, or as athletic as your mommy was. So don't break nothing, you hear? She chuckled, a wet, emphysema-riddled laugh, as she sucked on a cancer stick. I will, Aunt Lydia, I said, already standing to escape the incoming fog of smoke. I grabbed a flashlight and headed downstairs. Oh yeah, and my name is Jack. I'm the third one, but not consecutively. I'm just Jack, and my last name isn't Schmidt, it's Morgan, so I don't have the Roman numerals after my name, but I am named after my great-grandfather, the milkman, and his son Jack, my grandpa. I always hated the cellar. It had that moist, musty smell, unique to East Coast basements. Limestone and long winters turned it into a dank dungeon that terrified us as kids. Jimmy and Alan used to lock me down there for fun, laughing while I counted my breath in the dark until I cried. I swore I heard things moving when I was 8, begging for sunlight through the cracks in the creaky staircase. I'm not gonna lie though, while it was happening, I was terrified. But looking back, it was fun, and being scared as a little kid is one exhilarating feeling that you seem like you're chasing your whole adult life. That is, until it actually happens. As I got older, the fear faded. I even found cool stuff in the basement, like old ashtrays, books, newspapers from the early 1900s, bottle caps, and a Brooks Robinson baseball card that belonged to my Uncle Bobby, who died in Vietnam. I still have it, and it's one of my prized collectibles. As I ascended down that creaky stairs, the smell punched me right in the nose, dragging memories with it right into the cellar. I found the Avon bottles and started to stack them all near the stairs to bring them up. When I removed the majority of them, I noticed the stone wall behind them was in severe disrepair. I pulled on a brick, and a whole section of the wall crumbled to the ground at my feet. Leaping out of the way, I avoided being hit by any debris. Never the most nimble of foot? My ass, Aunt Lydia, I thought, as cold, rank air spilled over me. I removed a few more bricks and shined the flashlight inside, revealing a hidden space sealed off for who knows how long. Hidden behind the wall sat a little cove frozen in time, holding 2 generations of Schmidt milkman history. Bottles hid behind old milking equipment buried in soot and mouse nests. Bottles of thick, clear glass with wax seals still intact after almost a century and a half. I reached in and grabbed one to get a better look at the label, yellowed and curling. Jack's Tonic, for health, long life, and fullness of form. Cold kept, shake before sinning. As I mentioned, my great-grandfather was the milkman to many. For milk. But he didn't just sell milk. As kids, the family story we were told when we asked about him was that during the Great Depression, he also sold tonics made from milk, from a wagon, then an old truck, all over the Northeast. Some said he was a healer. Others called him a con man. And what I'd come to find out to my surprise later on was that a few swore he was a devil. To me, he was just Great-Grandpa Jack, the milkman of legend and family lore. I had just stumbled on a stash of his tonic and was enthralled by it. I brought one bottle upstairs. Aunt Lydia nearly knocked the ashtray off of the coffee table with her foot. She shot up so fast from the couch. "Oh my God," she said. "Is that? That looks just like Granddaddy's," she said, reaching for it. "Daddy always said 1 sip kept him young, 2 made him strong, 3 made him see things. It was so damn strong." She laughed through smoke-scarred lungs, but her eyes stayed serious. Before she left that evening, Mom warned me to keep an eye on Lydia, because the truth behind Jack's Tonic was that it was a bottled version of a White Russian. And where there is booze, there is Lydia. Because when Mom left that evening to take care of her dogs in Rochester, it meant I was alone in the house with Loony Lydia. That was my nickname for her. To avoid her and the permanent cloud of smoke that circled around her, I prepped tools for the next day for the drywall repairs. Then I talked to my wife in Oregon, and I promised her I'd wrap things up quickly and get home as soon as I could. She was 4 months pregnant with our first child, and I was chomping at the bit to get home to her. I didn't want to come here in the first place, but Mom really needed my help. After I hung up, I heard Lydia talking to herself, watching the news, blaring on the TV, so she could hear it in every room she walked into. She paced the house, yelling at the TV from time to time, with a beer welded to her hand, chain smoking until she ran dry of both. She was cocked out of her mind by 7:30 p.m. and begged me to get her more beer. Slurring while trying to convince me that I like shitty beer too, she tempted me with the big sale on Milwaukee's Best and Old Milwaukee at the Melrose convenience store. Though it was hard to resist, I refused politely, telling her I had to meet my friends. She mumbled something negative about me I couldn't understand, but I received the message regardless. She eventually passed out as I was leaving, and I left her snoring on the couch. I went out to meet friends I hadn't seen in years, had a few drinks, told a few stories, and made my way back to the house around 1 a.m. When I walked inside, the bottle of my great-grandpa's tonic I brought up was completely empty on the kitchen floor. I should have known better. This old fiend couldn't wait until tomorrow, so she cracked open and guzzled down a 100-year-old plus bottle of coffee and milk that most certainly was rotten just to taste that booze. I expected to find her dead with some kind of bacterial poison or something like that, but instead, there she was, passed out on the floor near the couch, with her nightgown riding up in ways I didn't want to see. So I raced to my room. She woke me up with her loud, liquid coughing the next morning. There she sat in the kitchen, smoking and drinking coffee, hangover-free. She ignored me as I made a cup. I cut the tension by asking her if she was okay. She looked at me like I just ripped a fart in church, so I needed to elaborate about her drinking the tonic. She said it was fine, she was fine, just tasted like licorice and milk, and that it made her bones tingle. I feel like a young woman again, she said, rubbing her arms. Like I could dance all night and ride like the wind, if you know what I mean, she cackled. I literally puked in my mouth at the images she just sexually assaulted my brain with, so I got the hell out of there as fast as I could. Motivated to get away from her, I worked nonstop, rebuilding the wall, while she drank and napped. She moved better, complained less, and didn't bother me that day. She even ordered me my favorite roast beef and barbecue sauce sub with banana peppers on it from Tony's. That night, I showered and crashed hard. The next morning, there she was again when I woke up, in the same pose, watching the news in the kitchen. But on this day, she had a bottle of Jack's Tonic cracked open that she was pouring into her coffee. Her skin looked different today, pale and waxy, and she sat more hunched. When I walked by to grab my coffee, she let out a huge fart. "Whoops, the gooses are out this morning," she said dully, and looked at me with sunken eyes swallowed by purple bruised bags. Again, motivation to get the fuck out of Dodge ASAP made me hustle, sanding drywall and prepping paint. As I was bent over, taping the area down, she crept up behind me. Her spine cast a warped shadow across the wall. I turned around and she smiled without blinking, said nothing, then wandered off like a lizard. I could have sworn her eyes flashed yellow before settling back to green. It was unsettling, and I cursed my mom for leaving me alone with her. All I could think about while I was painting was George's Marvelous Medicine, that Roald Dahl story where he makes a potion for his mean hag of a grandma that eventually makes her disappear. I felt just like George, trapped with her in this house, and I wished that tonic would just make her go away. That night, she watched TV without glasses, and I noticed her cough was gone. She perched on the couch like a possum in a dress. When she laughed, her tongue lingered out of her mouth a little too long, and her teeth looked sharper to me. Something was off, and I was homesick and really pissed at my mom for leaving me here with George's fucking grandma. But this hag was addicted to the marvelous medicine and wasn't dying. Later, while prepping tools, I heard her whispering at the cellar door, soft words, but spoken deeply in German. I had no idea she knew German, considering she barely spoke proper English. Shit was getting weird, and I was getting tired of this shit. So I called my mom and let her have it in a voice message and asked her to come back and check in on her crazy sister. She rang me back and said she'd be there by noon tomorrow. I wasn't going home yet, but at least I wouldn't suffer here alone. I went out by myself and ate some wings and met up with my buddy later on. He said something funny that stuck with me when I told him about the tonic. I had no idea, but when we were little, his grandpa told him a story about my great-grandpa. Back in the day, many people accused him of being a Satanist, someone who practiced witchcraft. I was baffled to numbness, but somehow I knew this was true. There was something to this. With that info sticking into my skull, I started digging around the house later that night when I got back. I examined the bottles again and searched around the cellar for any other info I could find. That's when I noticed something peculiar I had missed upon the original excavation when I went back in there with 2 flashlights. As I looked at the cellar wall, I noticed there were strange symbols painted on them. Some looked like they were made in paint and others in chalk. And then I looked at the cases of bottles again. There was one set with the same symbols written on the outside of the wooden case that gave me goosebumps when I touched it, realizing immediately it was written in blood. I took some pictures with my phone and retreated to my room. As I looked at them, it showed me the room in a way I had not been able to process while I was down there in the basement. I had a terrifying feeling that there was something else behind that wall with symbols on it, like another wall. Obsessed now, I went sleuthing on the internet, searching for anything I could find on the town's history with Satanism, my great-grandfather, the symbols, and of course, Jack's Tonic. That's when I found an old Reddit thread from 10 years ago, where someone else had discovered 2 bottles in their grandparents' basement in Syracuse, about an hour or so from here. Caught up in the similarities between our finds, I kept reading and found a follow-up post from a year later where they had tested Jack's Tonic. The ingredients they reported were like something out of Harry Potter, which included mugwort and mandrake root, along with bacteria, milk, mercury, and several other chemicals no one could identify. But what stuck in my gut even harder was the history behind the bottles that this person also reported. Apparently, my grandfather, aka the milkman, had been linked to heinous sacrificial murders and several disappearances in 4 states. He also shared images of old newspaper articles to prove it. He ended the story with something an old-timer told him that he interviewed, claiming a mob eventually lynched Jack, but nobody ever knew his real name or where he came from. Learning something this horrible about a family member is a feeling I cannot explain to you easily. Shock, repulsion, anger, and the fear ate their way through my mind in a matter of seconds. Everything was a lie. He didn't die in his boots, or any of that bullshit Lydia and my grandma peddled to us. This man was a murderer who drugged people with his snake oil that he intended to transform them or him into something awful. Some he cut up and supposedly ate them in a sacrifice to some ancient god this person referred to as Vorum the Curd Sire. I said the name aloud, immediately wishing I hadn't for fear of summoning it. Chills crept up my spine and manifested as goosebumps across my entire body. I felt like I was 8 again, trapped in the cellar, as the stench of Vorum the Curd Sire, a druidic god lost to time, appeared. I put my phone on the bed and stood up to gather my wits. Jack's Tonic wasn't medicine. It was a milker, an ancient ritual sealed in glass, meant to grow something vile inside a human host until it was ready. The final dose delivered it. Terror engulfed me in the form of my reality. Aunt Lydia drank who knows how many bottles of that shit. All the while, the bottle was really drinking her. I locked my door and slept badly, waking every half hour. Vorum the Curd Sire, the creepiest name I had ever heard, rolled through my mind over and over. Lydia was right about one thing. This place was cursed. It made me wonder if she knew about all of this. Did my mom? A game of cat and mouse ensued within my brain that night between the reality of my family's past and the people I loved that may have known about it. Just after 3 a.m, a moan rolled through the house. A loud thud followed that made me spring out of bed. It wasn't a dream because I couldn't sleep. I dressed, grabbed my phone, and turned on the flashlight. The sound came from downstairs, in the basement, and as I stepped into the hallway, her whisper floated up through the floorboards, wet and slow. The smell followed me down the stairs, thick with sour milk, rot, and the damp mineral stink of an old cave, of death, old and forgotten. "Aunt Lydia, you okay?" I called. She didn't answer. Then I heard her yell from the cellar. That snapped me out of it. Dementia made sense. Possession by Vorum the Curd Sire through my great-grandfather's old-ass tonic didn't. I told myself I was being stupid and went down to help her. She tackled me on the stairs. The banister snapped as I fell awkwardly through the stairs. My head slammed into limestone, and I felt a piece of wood rip into my rib. My phone skidded away. She crushed my throat with her freezing hands, eyes glowing yellow in the dim light. She tried forcing the last bottle into my mouth and dragged me toward the wall with the symbols. It was now open wide, and she pushed me toward it with a strength that this 5-foot, 69-year-old should not have. "You little bastard," she growled. "You're the missing piece. He's thirsty again. The family has to provide. It's the pact." She began speaking in a language I could not understand, voice bubbling thick with malice. Her skin, reptilian and evil, flaked in the dim light of the cellar as she moved. Something shifted behind the wall, old and rotting. I saw its eyes gleam. It was watching me. She pressed me up against the wall, and in one disgusting move, she rubbed her crotch on my leg and shuddered a moan I could only describe as ecstasy. I turned away, repulsed, yet motivated to stay alive and find a way out. As she rubbed on me again, her hand loosened around my neck. I reached behind me, breaking her grasp, to grab a metal stair railing that had broken off. I swung it blindly with all of my strength. The rail punched into her neck, and she fell backward, screaming into the dark. Something stirred as a chorus of non-human sounds assaulted my mind with a pain that should have broken me as I turned to run. The thought of my unborn child willed me to push through the agony. Grasping onto a step still intact on the stairs, I pulled myself up. I could hear them. Something, multiple things, screaming, growling, hissing, all at once in one terrifying cacophony that was not just a sound, but a weapon they were using to hurt me. Adrenaline carried me as I ran upward. The stairs collapsed behind me, and the large can of turpentine fell down, which I had placed on the top step before I went out. The horrific sounds stopped, and I could hear it glugging out onto the basement floor below. My brain was free. I left everything there, grabbed my keys, and hopped on I-90, the New York State Thruway. I drove straight to my mother's house in Rochester. I drove until sunrise, while visions of the turpentine catching fire and burning the ancient horror in the basement followed me until I arrived on my mother's doorstep. Exhausted and in shock, I did my best to explain everything to my mother. I can read her well, and I was relieved to see that she knew nothing about any of it. Everything came rushing back to her, and all the little clues that stuck in her mind over the years about her grandma, her mom, and likely her older sister started to make sense. We experienced an emotional moment in that kitchen that nobody should ever have to share with their child or parent. We wept and hugged until we were startled apart by the loud rotary-sounding ring of her iPhone. It was a call from the Frankfurt Fire Department, who reported to her that the house burned to the ground this morning. They estimated that it started about an hour and a half ago, after I'd already reached Rochester. They found no remains and were unsure yet where it started or the cause. Had I willed it to happen in my mind while driving there with some genetic ancient witchcraft I unknowingly possessed? Was it just coincidence? I did not know and never will. After she hung up, I immediately drove to the nearest AT&T store, got a new phone, and got on a plane. When we landed in Oregon, I turned my new phone on. I was shaken to realize I had received several texts and a forwarded message from my wife that came from my number, my phone. I couldn't play it in the car ride home, dreading what was on there. Getting to my family was all that mattered. When I got home, I showered and made love to my wife, and we went to bed. I said nothing at this point, but she knew something was wrong. Now ready to explain to her what had happened, we played the message together in bed. "Hi, honey. It's Aunt Lydia. I'm looking for your husband. See, he left me and his great-grandpa here in a bind. We need him." A pause, then heavy breathing followed. The voice was gravelly and deep, like a man trying to impersonate a woman, but with a tongue too big for their mouth. "And if we can't get him, well then, we'll just take that precious little baby of yours. Matter of fact, that juicy little baby would be just what the doctor ordered for Grandpa. I'll be in touch now. Bye, honey." I dropped the phone in terror. Time has passed since the incident, and the birth of my daughter has brought me great joy. Her arrival helped push that memory into the shadows of time, but the past will always linger. I still hear that screech in my nightmares that haunts me daily. It's always the same. I wake up sweating and I hold my daughter tightly. The fear of leaving her alone ever is compounded by the unspeakable horror of my family's legacy that I dread is one day coming for me and my baby girl. I never stop waiting for that call or peering with caution around every corner. My eyes are open, always scanning the world for a sign or a symbol. The fear of letting my guard down a second too long, just enough for the past to claw its way back in, keeps me alert while questioning everything. Living a life that can never mistake silence for safety is a terrible way to live. I wonder when she'll be in touch. I know what used to be my Aunt Lydia is still out there, lurking just beyond the edge where sanity gives way to primordial terror. I know Vorum the Curdsire is hungry and always will be. I know very little, and it's the gaps in my understanding that casts a shadow of uncertainty, relentlessly following me into every sleepless night. But what truly keeps me grounded is simpler than knowing what, where, or why. I know who I am, and that's all that matters. I stay on watch because anything that comes for my daughter comes through me first. Love is as real as anything the darkness can summon, and once it's set in motion, it doesn't stop. That's why I'll do whatever it takes to protect my daughter, and I won't stop until there's nothing left.
Horror.
You're listening to Nerd Horror Stories, a twice-weekly horror anthology series. No commentary, no long intros, just stories. Stories to fall asleep to, stories to keep you awake, and stories that feel close to home. Please subscribe